Good morning, everyone. It is March 7th, 2021, the very first Sunday of March. And so if you are joining us in the service live and in person, we will be serving communion. Of course, we do it with masks and socially distanced, and you get your own personal little communion thing. And I just want you to know that because of that, the message part of this video will be shorter. So I know you're disappointed I won't talk for much longer. In Huntsville, Alabama, there is a local cafe there called the Meteor Cafe. And apparently at that cafe, they serve some very delicious crab legs. And on February 26th, 2019, there were a number of people in the cafe eating the crab legs, and fortunately, one of them happened to be Police Officer Gerald Johnson. Officer Johnson had just sat down to eat his dinner, and he was maybe a couple of bites in when he began to hear the sounds of people starting to argue and raise their voices. The arguing became shouting, and he soon began to hear the metal clanking sound of people hitting each other with big metal kitchen tongs. A brawl had broken out over who got the next available batch of crab legs. Johnson reported that everyone was saying, she cut me in line, he cut in line in front of me, I was here first. And it turns out that the people fighting had waited for some time, maybe like 10 minutes, for crab legs. And when the legs came out, it got really heated. After it was all over, the police arrested John Chapman and Chiquita Jenkins. Chapman himself sustained a significant cut on his forehead from being swiped with some tongs, and eventually both of them were ordered to pay over $100 in fines. But here's my favorite line from the report. It says, both Chapman and Jenkins admitted to letting their temper cloud their judgment. No kidding. 2 people arrested over crab legs. Now, we've been talking about matters of the heart over the last few weeks, and I'm almost finished with the series, but we've primarily looked at some of the miracles of Jesus that are really important in not only helping us see who Jesus is, but also that it's helped us address some things in our own life that we might be struggling with, times when we feel stuck, or the times when we doubt in our hearts, or the question our heart asks, do I have what it takes? And last week we talked about how much our hearts need life and resurrection. But as I thought about it, there's some other matters of the heart that have been emerging in all of us over the last years, particularly due to COVID and lockdowns. And these are things that I've found in myself and things that are really not that helpful in bringing life or restoration to my heart. So I titled this message as Heartburn, and I want to address the selfishness that can appear in our hearts from time to time. Because these days, folks, it's not just about crab legs. Over and over in the news and throughout social media, there's a lot of examples of people very loudly asserting that their needs and their wants and their priorities are clearly the most important and should be put ahead of everyone else's. And although this is not a story about a miracle that Jesus performed, it is a parable from him, and in it, he contrasts the action of 2 very selfish sons with the incredible love of their father. And we're going to read Luke 15, 11 through 32. And it says this. Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all that he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired men have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men.' So he got up and went off to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate, for this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field, and when he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. 'Your brother has come,' he replied, 'and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound.' The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, 'Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders, yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him.' 'My son,' the father said, 'you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.'" That's our reading this morning. I know I've mentioned to you a pastor named Dan Myers before. He's a pastor in Illinois, in Oak Brook, Illinois. And in one of his sermons, he tells a story about a man named Toby. This is what he writes. He says, "The man's name was Toby. He was the youngest son of a lawyer from Cleveland who had struck it rich and moved his family to the upscale community of Rancho Santa Fe, California. The family lived in a magnificent home on a hill with a swimming pool that overlooked fragrant citrus groves and a view of the valley that seemed to go on forever. Toby had a great life. Each year, the trust fund that Toby's dad had set up for him because of his success kicked out a very handsome income that freed Toby to pursue his interests, mainly dabbling in real estate development. His dad loved Toby, wanted Toby to be a success and build a business and know the joy of being in a position to help the lives of others. This is why what happened at their poolside that morning was so puzzling. Toby had come home while his mom was out playing tennis and found his father alone on the terrace. He said, "Dad, there's this property near Las Vegas that I want very badly. It costs more than I have coming in from you. Can you give me the money I need to tie it up?" This was not a new conversation. Toby's father had often explained to his son that he wanted the best for him, but it was important that he learn to live within the generous means that he already provided. So his dad said no, and he said to his son, "Don't worry, Toby. there are more resources coming to you once your mom and I are gone. But for now, the best we can do is help you to think through how to build a life of value and integrity with the gifts that you've been given. Toby's mother later told Dan Myers that this line of discourse was always upsetting to Toby. She said Toby never liked limits. Because he knew his parents had more, he felt that he should have more of it. His mom said Toby always felt that it was our responsibility to do whatever he believed would make him happy. When his dad said no, Toby became very angry. Well, that's a huge understatement. The first conversation that Pastor Dan Meyer had with Toby was in the San Diego County Jail. And he was there because on that sunny San Diego morning, he listened to his father set a limit one more time and then picked up a very large terracotta planter that sat by the pool and murdered his father with it. Toby's mother was absolutely devastated. Myers writes this, "When I asked Toby if he had any sense at all of what this act had done to his mom, he turned to me and said, 'Does she have any concept of what it's doing to me now that she's cut off all my funds?'" Wow. Thankfully, we don't run into people like Toby all that often, but there exists in many people a much milder version of the selfishness that we're familiar with. And as we look at our passage today, we get a story that has a big root of it regarding selfishness. And there's a man who has two sons, and the younger one wants his share. The father agrees to that, and in a short amount of time, the younger son takes off to a distant country and spends all of his money, squanders it. Now, it's important to understand that in this culture at the time of Jesus, to demand your inheritance and leave before your father died was a staggering act of disrespect and disregard for the father. In fact, the younger son request is actually equal to him saying to his dad, "Drop dead." Now, there was a situation in the law where the inheritance could be given to the sons before the death of the father, but it was only done on the initiative of the father. And even if a son did get his inheritance ahead of the father's death, the son would be expected to stay at home to provide for the family until the father had died. The conduct of the younger son is appalling and it's shameful. And for the listeners of the parable, they saw that. But what they would see would be worse was that the father would actually even agree to an arrangement like this. The father would be despised by his own neighbors for even considering his son's request. The selfishness of the younger son is clearly off the charts. And although I don't think any of us have ever done what the selfish son did, the younger son, but we recognize that we can see the younger son occasionally in all of us as well. We want what we want. And now, I hope you've had the opportunity to see the movie Shrek. It gets so many things right in our lives, about our lives. One example is this pitiful little selfish king of the land, Lord Farquaad. Farquaad is a little man, he's a single man, and the one thing he feels is missing from his kingdom is the lovely Princess Fiona. Fiona has been locked in a castle far away and is guarded by a fire-breathing dragon, and there have been many failed attempts to try to rescue Fiona, and many of the would-be rescuers have lost their lives. So Farquaad gathers his bravest knights for a competition, and the knights are all placed within an arena to duel against each other until there's only one left. The winning knight will have the honor of going out on Lord Farquaad's behalf to rescue Fiona. Farquaad is a coward and a selfish one, and he offers this inspirational speech to the knights before they turn against each other in the arena. He says, "Brave knights, you are the best and brightest in all the land. Today one of you shall prove himself. That champion shall have the honor, no, the privilege to go forth and rescue the lovely Princess Fiona from the fiery keep of the dragon. If for any reason the winner is unsuccessful, the first runner-up will take his place, and so on and so forth down the line. Some of you will die, but it's a sacrifice I'm willing to make." All of us act like Farquaad sometimes. To one degree or another, we try to protect ourselves and seek our own interests first. In our passage, we don't know how long it took, but the younger son burns through all of his money and finally does the right thing. He comes to his senses, decides to go home, return to his father, and he begins practicing his "please forgive me" speech all the way home. He decides that he's going to beg his father to take him on as a hired hand. But the entire story is completely rewritten by the actions of the father. The father sees him trudging up the road, runs to him, embraces his smelly, dirty, good-for-nothing body, and then commands the servants to bring him a robe and a ring and sandals for his feet, and orders that they have a huge party to celebrate his homecoming. And to add to the crazy behavior of the dad also goes out and takes care and reassures the older son, who's selfish in a different way and wants nothing to do with the little twerp that just arrived. And the father tells him in verse 31, "My son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and now is found." And I love the story, and I can kind of picture the little biblical characters in my mind in the wherever it's taking place, but try to think of it in terms of today. Jump back to our original story about Toby and his murder of his father because his father did not give him more money. I mean, try to imagine what would happen is if Toby's father had survived that day. Imagine what the dad might have said years or so later, where he's been recovering and healed up, and then Toby suddenly walked back in through the back door and asked him for forgiveness. I'm not sure I could run to my child after being so brutally assaulted, let alone throw him a welcome home party. See, there's two heart issues here. In my heart, it's often very hard for me to forgive someone like the Father forgives. And second, in my heart, it's very hard for me to accept being forgiven like it's in the story. And both of those things can stem from selfishness. Here's how. My own selfishness makes it hard for me to forgive someone who's hurt me, right? I'm going to protect myself. I don't want to forgive people who've hurt me. They don't deserve it, and they'll probably just do it again. If I have to keep interacting with this kind of people, they're on probation. I'm going to take care of me first. But interestingly, in my own selfishness, it's also hard for me to accept being completely forgiven by someone. I know I've broken their trust. I've caused something to become between us, and I'm pretty sure they're never really going to forget what I did. It'd probably be better for me not to seek any restoration with this person. See, our enemy can twist things up so much that we don't want to extend forgiveness, we don't want to ask for forgiveness, and we can't accept forgiveness often when we get it. Our hearts are selfish, and we always are looking to go after what we believe is most going to satisfy us, to give us the most pleasure, and to give us the most life. It's a huge matter of the heart and tends to get in the way of so many things that Jesus is calling us to be and do. We've been looking at the miracles of Jesus over the last few weeks. And even though there's no miracle today, once again, Jesus is telling us who God the Father is. He's telling us who he is. The younger prodigal son is offered full, complete, life-giving grace by the Father. The younger son is fully reinstated and completely forgiven. The older son is loved and assured that he's not going to miss out on anything. Everything the Father has is his. And the grace and the love of the Father is astounding. And it can overcome the deepest areas of selfishness in our hearts. Now, if you're in the service today, we're having communion, and the communion table in front of us says that you are completely forgiven. The table's a reminder of our need to forgive others, and the table is a place where selfishness has absolutely no standing and no authority. Friends, I don't expect to ever read about any of you fighting over crab legs. And I also don't expect I'll be visiting any of you in prison. And I'm really grateful for that. But don't let selfishness take root in your heart. Hebrews 12:15 says, "See to it that no one misses the grace of God, so that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile many others." When we're selfish, we miss the grace of God and we do great damage to our hearts. So let's come to the table and lay before the Lord the things we know that are rooted in selfishness and the things that are causing us heartburn. Would you pray with me? Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for giving your body and your blood on the cross. Thank you for your great love and for showing us the love of the Father, that even when we are selfish and wanting our own way and running off like the prodigal, or when we're selfish and wanting our own way and staying put like the older son, we know that it's your love that changes the entire story. Thank you. Let us celebrate when people come home, when people come to know you. Let's celebrate that we've been given everything from you. Lord, as we take communion today, we remember your great sacrifice on the cross, and we thank you for forgiving us and forgiving all of our selfishness. Change that in our hearts, Lord. It will make us new. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, I hope you have a good week. I will talk to you soon, and see you later.